It was a cold December in 2010, just before Christmas, when a chilling mystery unfolded in the city of Bristol. 25-year-old Joanna Yeates, a landscape architect, suddenly vanished without a trace in Clifton, a lively, generally safe part of the city, leaving everyone baffled. Joanna was a successful young professional with a bright future, originally from Hampshire, and she had moved to Bristol for her career. She was happily building a life with Greg. On the evening of Friday, the 17th of December, Joanna had been out celebrating with colleagues at a local pub. She left for home around 8 p.m., stopping at a shop to buy a pizza for dinner, but she never made it to her flat that night. She had planned nothing more than a quiet evening, and that was a plan she would never get to enjoy. Joanna lived with Greg Reardon in a flat on Canning Road in Clifton. That weekend, Greg had been away visiting family. When he returned on Sunday, the 19th of December, he found their home empty. Joanna's keys, phone, and coat were there. Even the cat was there, but Joanna was gone. Alarmed, Greg called her phone repeatedly, but there was no answer. He reached out to her friends, and none had seen or heard from her all weekend. As night fell, with still no sign of her, Greg contacted the police to report her missing. A search was about to begin. In the days that followed, police and volunteers scoured the area for any sign of Joanna. Her photo was circulated everywhere, on the news, online, on posters taped to lampposts. Her parents and Greg made tearful public appeals, begging for any information. The case dominated headlines as Christmas approached. All of Britain seemed to hope for a miracle, wishing Joanna would be found safe and alive. Some puzzling clues turned up. Investigators discovered that Joanna had bought a pizza on her way home. They found the empty pizza box in her flat, yet the pizza itself was missing, as if it had vanished into thin air. And when her body was eventually found, one of her socks was gone too. These odd details fueled rampant speculation, as if someone had intentionally removed or hidden evidence to confuse investigators. As days passed with no answers, anxiety in Bristol grew. Police checked CCTV footage from the streets, investigated similar unsolved cases of missing women, and chased every lead they could find. Nothing solid emerged, and it was as if Joanna had simply disappeared. On Christmas morning, that agonizing uncertainty came to a tragic end. A couple walking their dog in Fayland, a village just outside Bristol, spotted a body lying in the snow on the side of a lane. Police rushed to the scene. On what should have been a day of joy, the Yeates family received devastating news. The body was identified as Joanna. The hope of finding her alive was shattered, and now it was a murder investigation. Flowers and police appeals soon marked the spot on Longwood Lane where Joanna's body was found. Mourners placed bouquets by a stone wall, and officers posted a large sign urging anyone with information to step forward. The community's grief and determination were clear in this roadside memorial. An autopsy was performed. At first, the frozen condition of Joanna's body made findings difficult, but the post-mortem revealed that she had been strangled to death. Someone had taken her life. With this horrifying discovery, the search for a killer began in earnest. The police redoubled their efforts, launching one of the largest investigations the city had ever seen. Dozens of officers worked around the clock, determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. A reward of £60,000 was offered for any clue that might solve the case. Media attention soared, and the public demanded results. Naturally, detectives first questioned the people closest to Joanna. Greg was scrutinized but cleared almost immediately, as he had been 120 miles away in Sheffield when she vanished. Joanna's family and friends were also ruled out, with no evidence implicating them. The focus then turned to other people in Joanna's orbit, including her neighbors and anyone who might have crossed her path that night. A nearby resident remembered hearing a scream on the 17th of December, sometime around 9 p.m. It was high-pitched and cut off abruptly. At the time, the person had not known what to make of it, but now the scream took on a sinister significance. It could have been Joanna at the moment she was attacked. Forensic teams combed her flat for any trace of a struggle. They even removed the front door for testing, hoping to find DNA or fibers. There was no sign of forced entry, and the flat itself seemed largely undisturbed. It was a baffling scenario with few answers. Then, a significant development occurred on the 30th of December, 2010. Early that day, police arrested Christopher Jeffries, a 65-year-old retired schoolteacher who owned the building where Joanna and Greg lived. Jeffries was known in the community for his eccentric manner and trademark white hair, but he had never before been suspected of violence. Yet, when news broke of his arrest, certain newspapers declared that the killer had been found. Tabloid reporters swarmed outside the property, printing sensational headlines. They highlighted Jeffries' unusual looks and quiet lifestyle, as if these proved guilt. He was labeled odd, strange, and worse, in what became a vicious campaign against him. In the court of public opinion, many had decided that Jeffries was the culprit before any evidence had surfaced. At the police station, Jeffries was interrogated thoroughly, while officers searched his flat. But they did not find any definitive link to Joanna, and 2 days later they released him on bail without charges. With no evidence connecting him to the crime, he walked out legally innocent, yet publicly tarnished. The damage was immense. An innocent man, he found himself at the center of national scorn. Over time, Jeffries cleared his name and was awarded damages for libel from several newspapers that had smeared him. Even Greg, in the midst of grief, criticized the aggressive finger pointing at innocent people. Eventually, the Attorney General took legal action against certain tabloids for their reckless coverage. The case of Christopher Jeffries became a notorious example of trial by media gone wrong. By early 2011, the police officially confirmed that Jeffries was no longer a suspect, but his ordeal would not be soon forgotten. As the whirlwind of accusations against Jeffries settled, the real killer remained free. The police continued to pursue every lead, determined not to be distracted by sensational headlines. They conducted more interviews, revisited all the evidence, and turned to criminal profilers for help. The frustration was immense, but they refused to give up. By mid-January 2011, with no firm suspect, Joanna Yeates' parents appeared on a televised crime program, tearfully appealing for assistance. Shortly after, an anonymous female caller phoned the police, naming an individual who lived in Joanna's building. Everything changed in that moment. Police swiftly focused on Vincent Tabak, a 32-year-old Dutch engineer who lived next door to Joanna. In the initial stages, Tabak had provided a statement and had not attracted major suspicion. He had traveled to the Netherlands for the holiday, which explained his absence. But the anonymous tip forced investigators to give him a closer look. On the 20th of January, 2011, police arrived at Tabak's flat and arrested him quietly, hoping to avoid another media storm. When the public learned of Tabak's arrest, there was surprise and confusion. Some people assumed the case had gone cold. Others still believed Jeffries might be the killer. Now, a seemingly mild neighbor was in custody for murder. Evidence quickly piled up. Lab results showed that Tabak's DNA appeared on Joanna's body and clothing. Fibers from her clothes matched materials found in Tabak's possessions. Phone records placed him at or near the crime scene at crucial times. Confronted with these facts, Tabak did not hold out for long. He disclosed a chilling truth. When Jeffries was under suspicion, Tabak had lied to investigators, claiming he saw Jeffries driving off at a suspicious time. This lie was apparently intended to steer blame away from himself. It proved how cunning he had been, letting the world fixate on Jeffries while he quietly kept a low profile. Eventually, Tabak admitted responsibility, though he insisted it was manslaughter, not murder. He claimed he had made an unwanted advance on Joanna the night she disappeared. When she screamed, he panicked and strangled her by accident. He swore he never intended to kill her. Yet the prosecution countered with a darker narrative. They described how Joanna's body bore numerous bruises and a broken nose, pointing to a violent struggle. They revealed that Tabak had researched body decomposition rates and garbage collection schedules, implying he had planned how to dispose of evidence. They emphasized his larger physical stature and calm demeanor, suggesting he had deliberately overpowered Joanna. In October 2011, Tabak stood trial for murder. The jury rejected his claim of an accidental killing, finding him guilty of murder and sentencing him to life imprisonment with a minimum of 20 years behind bars. There was an overwhelming sense of relief as the real killer was finally held accountable. In the courtroom, Joanna's parents and Greg held each other, tears mixing sorrow with relief. Outside, The public took comfort in knowing that a dangerous man was off the streets. The murder of Joanna Yeates left a lasting impact on everyone who followed her story. It demonstrated the perils of a media circus, in which an innocent individual had been vilified without evidence. It also showcased the importance of meticulous investigative work. Amid the noise and wild guesses, the police stuck to the facts, and that unwavering approach eventually revealed the truth. Though it did not lessen the grief of losing Joanna, the conviction of Vincent Tabak offered some measure of justice and closure. This case remains a somber reminder of how critical it is to weigh evidence carefully, avoid jumping to conclusions, and let the facts speak for themselves. If the authorities had merely accepted the narrative that tabloids promoted, Christopher Jeffries might have been wrongly convicted, and the true killer might have walked free. Joanna Yeates is still remembered by those who knew her. Her story endures as a cautionary tale against rushing to judgment and a testimony to the power of thorough investigation. It is a story of heartbreak and outrage, of a community coming together, of reckless media coverage, and finally of justice served in the end. Her memory continues to resonate in Bristol and beyond, reminding everyone of the importance of searching for the real truth, no matter how many twists and turns it may take.